Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Community Church Unitarian Universalist. I'm your worship associate today, Amy Holtkamp, and it's a joy to be with you in person and virtually. So who are we as Community Church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email for announcements. Today, we are very pleased to welcome back to the pulpit CCUU member Sally Jackson. The first part of Sally's life was spent trying to fit in as the male that she was assigned at birth. Along with participating in numerous sports, she played trumpet in any musical group she could find, string bass in the ones that didn't need a trumpet. She had numerous careers, from carpenter's assistant to teaching at a junior college, from retail sales to professional photographer. Shortly after moving to New Orleans, Sally joined this community because it was so accepting. It was an easy fit as she had just transitioned, and a lot of other churches were not so open to transgender members. She had been observing different ministries for over 40 years as a professional musician and photographer. CCUU was different, truly welcoming, not just tolerant. This was a place to belong. She has served as the board president, member of the choir, is currently part of the tech force, music ministry, worship ministry, nominating committee, as well as part of the ministerial search committee. So now I give you Sally Jackson.
Okay. I call this call to worship is basically called to look back at yesterday. Yesterday was the Transgender Day of Remembrance, an event that is meant to bring awareness to the fact that around the world, hundreds of people are killed each year simply because they're transgender. The ceremonies have changed a great deal since I've been in New Orleans. When I first arrived here, there was a candlelight march to the statue of Joan d'Arc, where the names were read and each candle was extinguished as the name was read. This was before the formation of the Louisiana Trans Advocates. Two members of our community were among its founders, Elizabeth Jenkins and Donna Jean Loy. Lizzie then served as president, DJ served as secretary and treasurer. When they began to organize the local events, the service was held indoors with a candle being lit for each name read to celebrate that they had lived, not just their deaths. Now a number of groups are celebrating the Transgender Day of Resilience with a daytime march. It's a step forward, but unfortunately it's the step forward from our own community. We need to get the help of others to make that list disappear. Thank you.
It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship with the song, "We Light This Flame." We light this flame to affirm the light of truth and knowledge and the warmth of love and community and the fire of hope and commitment. And now I'd like to welcome up our wonderful RE director, Cynthia Ramirez, for the Time for All Ages.
Good morning once again. This morning I'm going to be reading from I Am Jazz. I am jazz. For as long as I can remember, my favorite color has been pink. My second favorite color is silver, and my third favorite color is green. Here are some of my other favorite things: dancing, singing, backflips, drawing, soccer, swimming, makeup, and pretending I'm a pop star. Most of all, I love mermaids. Sometimes I even wear a mermaid tail in the pool. My best friends are Samantha and Casey. We always have fun together. We like high heels, princess gowns, cartwheels, and trampolines. But I'm not exactly like Samantha and Casey. I have a girl brain, but a boy body. This is called transgender. I was born this way. When I was very little, my mom would say, "You're such a good boy." I would say, "No, Mama, good girl." At first, my family was confused, but they always thought as me as a boy. As I got a little older, I hardly ever played with trucks or tools or superheroes, only princess and mermaid costumes. My brother told me this was girl stuff. I kept right on playing. My sister says I was always talking to her about my girl thoughts and my girl dreams and how one day I would be a beautiful lady. She would giggle and say, "You're a funny kid." Sometimes my parents let me wear my sister's dresses around the house. But whenever we went out, I had to put on my boy clothes again. This made me mad. Still, I never give up trying to convince them. Pretending I was a boy felt like telling a lie. Then one amazing day, everything changed. Mom and Dad took me to meet a new doctor who asked me lots and lots of questions. Afterward, the doctor spoke to my parents, and I heard the word transgender for the very first time. That night, at bedtime, my parents both hugged me and said, "We understand now. Be who you are. We love you no matter what." This made me smile and smile and smile. Mom and Dad told me I could start wearing girl clothes to school and growing my hair long. They even let me change my name to Jazz. Being Jazz felt more like being like me. Mom said being Jazz would make me different from other kids at school, but that being different is okay. What's important, she said, is that I'm happy with who I am. Being Jazz caused some other people to be confused too, like the teachers at school. At the beginning of the year, they wanted me to use the boys' bathroom and play on the boys' team in gym class, but that didn't feel normal to me at all. I was so happy when the teachers changed their minds. I can't imagine not playing on the same team as Casey and Samantha. Even today, there are kids who tease me or call me by my boy name or ignore me altogether. This makes me feel crummy. Then I remember that the kids who get to know me usually want to be my friend. They say, I am one of the nicest girls in school. I don't mind being different. Different is special. I think what happens most is what a person is like inside. And inside, I am happy, I am having fun, and I am proud. I am Jazz. Thank you.
Our first reading is from a letter from the Office of the President of Queensborough Community College entitled Definition for Diversity. The concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect. It means understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing our individual differences. These can be along the dimensions of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, or other ideologies. It is the exploration of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. It is about understanding each other and moving beyond simple tolerance to embracing and celebrating the rich dimensions of diversity contained within each individual. Diversity is a reality created by individuals and groups from a broad spectrum of demographic and philosophical differences. It is extremely important to support and protect diversity because by valuing individuals and groups free from prejudice and by fostering a climate where equity and mutual respect are intrinsic, we will create a success-oriented, cooperative, and caring community that draws intellectual strength and produces innovative solutions from the synergy of its people. Diversity means more than just acknowledging and/or tolerating difference. Diversity is a set of conscious practices that involve understanding and appreciating interdependence of humanity, cultures, and the natural environment, practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences that are different from our own, understanding that diversity includes not only ways of being, but also ways of knowing, recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some, while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. Building alliances across differences so that we can work together to eradicate all forms of discrimination. Diversity includes, therefore, knowing how to relate to those qualities and conditions that are different from our own and outside the groups to which we belong, yet are present in other individuals and groups. These include, but are not limited to, age, ethnicity, class, gender, physical abilities, qualities, race, sexual orientation, as well as religious status, gender expression, educational background, geographical location, income, marital status, parental status, and work experiences. Finally, we acknowledge that categories of difference are not always fixed, but also can be fluid. We respect individual rights to self-identification, and we recognize that no one culture is intrinsically superior to another. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosity help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can see on our tally board here that we're doing a good job of raising our pledges here. We're up to 88% this week as of yesterday. If you'd like to give today, you can give online at ccuunola.org/stewardship or by text at 504-370-2659. Just text GIVE. You can also send a check to CCUU at 6690 Fleur-de-Lis Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70124. And you can give in person if you're here. You can come forward or just raise your hand and we will come to you. Thank you so much. Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you are watching online, please write your joys and sorrows in the comments section to be read aloud. If you're in person, you can either come up to the pulpit to share your joy or sorrow, or there are note cards in the foyer. You can fill one out if you haven't already, and if that's more comfortable for you. Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to come up and share something today? Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anyone sharing online. So we will light 2 candles, one for all of the joys that are still. Do we have any note card? Oh yeah, we did have one. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. So Liz Trotter sends her love and appreciates the kindness, compassion, and support she has received from this beloved community. And even though she has been unable to attend church in person, she keeps you all in her heart. She asks that you please send out prayers, good thoughts, and positivity on Tuesday morning when she will be undergoing yet another surgery for her chronic pain. Hopefully this time will be successful and the last one. Thank you. We absolutely send you all of our love and prayers, Liz, and we are with you hoping that this is the last one as well. So we'll light a candle for Liz and 2 more. One for the joys that are bubbling up and are too new to share, and one for the sorrows that we cannot yet put words to. Know that whatever you're experiencing right now, we love you and we hold you in our hearts. Our second reading is from What Nature Teaches Us About Diversity and Abundance, from Transforming Leadership to Achieve Diversity and Abundance by Dr. Kathleen Allen. Leadership, too, should seek out diversity to help the larger system thrive. Take a moment and try to imagine what a generous team would look like in an environment that values diversity. What would change in how you would behave with one another? How might your approach to conflict be different? What would it feel like to know you would be supported in your team and that resources would be shared rather than withheld? This is the time for a fundamental shift in how we think about diversity and resources. It's a time to dump our default thinking patterns to become better leaders of our organizations. We need to let go of the notion that diversity is a threat and shift to see the fundamental value and benefit of having difference in our system. Nature has proven that to support a regenerative system, diversity is critical. It is time to learn from its 3.8 billion years of research and development and apply its lessons to our organizations. Thank you.
Okay, now you may be wondering, since everything seems to be about diversity, why this particular sermon is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And other tangential questions. I suppose the best place to start would be by making sure that we all agree on the definition of tangential. The word is an adjective and its meaning is diverging from a previous course or line, erratic. Tangential thoughts are hardly touching a matter, peripheral. Okay. When we're confronted with something new, we have a few choices as to how to deal with it. We can just ignore it and pretend it's not real. We can admit that it's real and be frightened of it, which often leads to hating it. We can try to learn more about it to understand it better or to simply accept it. If you want to truly understand an android, let's assume we have androids at this point, you would need to better understand how artificial intelligence is programmed and processed. Asking an android if he dreams of electric sheep would tell you less than just asking if they dream. A more general question, but also a better insight to the processes. Ask if they dream of electric sheep can get you a negative answer while not letting you know if dreaming is a part of their process or not. However, asking invasive questions in casual conversation serves to dehumanize the one being questioned. Why would that matter to an android? Well, it's very simple. They are, in theory, replications of humans, and as such might very well replicate emotions and feelings as well. So if we should avoid such potential personal questions to androids, shouldn't we afford that same courtesy to humans? We tend to ask the least important and most tangential questions of anyone who seems different. The best example of this thought is from a friend of mine who said that his son is transgender, and that is absolutely the least interesting thing about him. Why we do that to people and somehow never seem to realize that the question is inappropriate, or so far afield that there's no chance that we give you any insight at all. Much like stating the obvious, it only reassures that your perception was accurate, when it probably wasn't really and barely scratched the surface. Asking inappropriate questions seems to have been a subject in school because most people are well versed in it. When a straight person meets a gay or lesbian couple, they tend to ask questions about their sex lives and usually expect great detail in the responses. This, if answered, gives you a very, very narrow view of what love is about for gay people and lesbians. They're drawn to each other in a very similar manner to how straight couples are drawn together. It might start with a physical attraction, and there has to be much more for a relationship to last. Beginning to sound more like straight couples, isn't it? There is a reason that relationships are a bit of a balancing act, celebrating the similarities and dealing with the differences. However, that way of looking at relationships makes a part of it a strain. Dealing with the differences. Wouldn't it be so much easier if we could also celebrate the differences? That is what we need to learn from nature. The amazing contrast between a calm ocean with a gentle tide caressing a sandy beach, and the angry waves crashing against a rocky cliff in an effort to bring it down into the sea. beautiful lush greenery in an alpine valley, in contrast to the rocky snow-capped mountains on either side, which actually are the reason that the valley is so lush and beautiful. We could learn a lot from nature. Cooperation is one thing. Even destructive acts often serve to build themselves back. An example would be a forest fire as opposed to people clear-cutting a forest. When we clear-cut a forest, we have to plant trees and nurture them to grow the forest back. In the case of a forest fire, the devastation is almost the same, but the results are very different in the long run. No one has to replant a burned forest. There is a loose coating of ash in the area, and seeds blown in from nearby forest or fields can settle into that ash and wait for the rain to start them growing. There are some of the nutrients that the seeds need to thrive in that ash, composed of the trees from before the fire. Some sections of trees didn't burn completely and are just there decomposing, releasing nutrients into the soil and bringing insects back to the forest area. Now that life has returned to this devastated area, birds and small animals begin to move back into the fledgling forest, and over the years, as the trees grow taller and the shade and thatch of the forest floor provide protection and a safer habitat for larger animals, the cycle of life continues, building new life from each death. The old trees burned, and now under the canopy of the new trees, insects and animals go through their lives and deaths, each serving to sustain the next. Cooperation is nature's way, even if it doesn't always look like it on the surface. Why is there so much diversity in nature? In that forest scenario, diversity is what brought the forest back. It required more than just the seeds. The insects, birds, and animals all served their parts. The insects do a great job of tilling that loose ash, while the birds and small animals do their part in fertilizing those tiny seeds and tender saplings on their way to becoming towering trees. Think about what our planet would be like without any diversity. You don't have to think that hard about it because Frank Herbert has done it for you. He called it Arrakis. Let's get a little more creative and add just a touch of diversity. We need a tree. That's nice, a desert with one kind of tree. A bit boring, so let's add a body of water and some grass. That's all we need. Sand, water, grass, and trees. Well, it's getting close to lunchtime. I wish there had been a fruit tree, maybe. Maybe more than one type of fruit tree is needed. Maybe more than one kind of fruit tree. How about even bananas or nut trees? Can't make a pecan pie without pecans. We'll need some sugar and flour for that pie, so that means we'll have to add cane, and what we'll need some butter, which means cows. You can see how it goes from there. Now you can see why there's so much diversity in nature. We might not need all of it for us, but to get all of the things that we do need, it requires a whole cycle of things that we never think about at all. It's the same with people. We need diversity. We think that we don't, but it's essential to development. If everyone was exactly the same, we would all have the same shared experiences. And in case you haven't noticed, a lot of discoveries came about from sharing parts of different cultures. There wouldn't be an Italian spaghetti if Marco Polo hadn't brought those noodles back from China. The sauces and variations the Italians added made it so much their own that most people are surprised to find noodles in Chinese soup, even though that's where they originated. That brings us to how humans decided on what to eat in the first place. It's always fascinated me. With all the diversity in the plants, mammals, fish, and fowl, how did people go about selecting what to eat? Obviously, some mistakes were bound to have been made to discover which mushrooms were poisonous, which ones weren't, and who looked at a mushroom and thought, that looks delicious. Foods were often banned in various religions and regions because of the lack of refrigeration available. When they first tried, many of these were later found to be edible and not dangerous when handled properly. A few thoughts here. Who looked at a lobster, crab, or crawfish and thought, that looks tasty. Or why one disgusting food source becomes a delicacy while another is used as the international symbol of horrible cuisine. Haggis is basically all the parts of a sheep that you wouldn't ever think of eating, like heart and lungs mixed with some more animal products and most people avoid. Then it's sewn into the sheep's stomach and boiled. All right. But escargot is a delicacy. Think about that second one for a moment. How did that come to be a food? Look at that slime trail. I bet the thing that left that must be delicious. Really? It requires a lot of garlic. Heavy spices are often used to mask inferior ingredients. We often assimilate foods and styles from cultures that some people feel are beneath them. In actuality, all cultures have their good and bad points and can never be ranked numerically best to worst, no matter how many people try to assess that thesis and prove that theirs is the best and should be the only culture. Back to another example of people admiring the diversity in nature while trying to avoid it in their own neighborhoods would be the diversity of the plants and flowers in each yard, the total lack of diversity in the people. When most neighborhoods were first formed, the people in it were all from the same backgrounds. That's why so many cities have a Chinatown. Now it's a place for going to experience the culture and a major stop on most city tours in places like New York and San Francisco. But both were started as a means of segregation. You had Italian neighborhoods, and even the Irish had their own neighborhoods because they weren't as welcome as most of the other English-speaking European immigrants. We always have excuses for why we have mistreated any particular group, and this was no doubt because so many poor Irish farmers arrived on our shores at the same time during the Great Potato Famine. That's not a joke, there was really a great potato famine. My sister was given an assignment in school to research how our family came to the United States. Everybody's expecting to find royalty somewhere and they're looking forward to what they do. She was disappointed to discover how many of our ancestors came here as a direct result of that very potato famine. They couldn't grow potatoes, so they sent members of the family to the New World to start a better life. They were greeted in some cities with signs that said, "Help wanted, Irish need not apply." That's why so many Irishmen worked on building the railroads. They were in the East looking for work, and the railroads were hiring for laying track. The Chinese did the same thing starting from the West, while the freed slaves were working all along the routes. It was back-breaking, dangerous work that no one really wanted to do, so it was available. Remember, when you hear people complaining about too many immigrants, our railroads were built by the most unwanted of all our immigrants at the time. Just look around, we're still struggling with this, sometimes self-imposed segregation. What do I mean by self-imposed? Well, any group that is obviously a target of bigotry and violence tend to huddle together for protection. It doesn't require any legislation or policies against them. They just don't feel safe among the general population. I had those feelings for years as part of a targeted community, the LGBTQ plus community. I chose to remain in the closet. I almost did the dreaded air quotes, but I'll spare you that. Actually, that was at the time it was only referred to as the gays, unless they were using words that no one should ever use. But when I finally decided to come out, I could tell that I was not in a very good place for that. I was offered an invitation to change my life for the better. An online friend who I had met in person once before invited me to move to New Orleans and split expenses in an apartment here. We were both recently divorced and needing new places to live. I am forever grateful to Elizabeth Jenkins' friendship and gracious invitation. I had now moved to an accepting community. Dallas had the Gayborhood, named that by its own residents, but Fort Worth had no such area. Now I had support groups, but I didn't want to be just in that one small community, especially not just the T of the LGBTQ+. I was lucky enough to find so many people who felt the same way. That's what made me want to join and help support this community, the Community Church. Starting over when you're turning 59 can be frightening. And then I transitioned at work, so another reboot at the age of 60. And I was beginning to get a new perspective on just how stifling our binary thinking can be. Binary thinking is very odd when you consider that all of life is in a grayscale. That's right, even black and white pictures are actually a grayscale. Stick figures can be black and white if the paper's white enough and the ink is really black. How do we undo such a long history of trying to stifle diversity by cramming it into 2 boxes? We do love to pigeonhole things. It's so uncluttered. Certainly not as disordered as reality. We need to think outside of the box. That in order to move beyond the binary, but unfortunately most people's idea of thinking outside of the box is to simply create a new box. That's how we tried to maintain segregation with the separate but equal idea. Create a separate but equal box to store the different ones in. It didn't work for racism or anything else that's been tried for. Except eyebrows. It worked great for eyebrows. Creating hundreds of new boxes for pigeonholing doesn't solve anything. It's just creating more divisions and more labeling. I've often stated that labeling is a convenient way to prejudge entire groups. Judging is not what we're supposed to be doing in the first place, and prejudging is a way to sort of fast forward through the process, somehow letting us overlook the fact that we shouldn't be doing it at all, much less making it easier. Binary is easy to understand. Yes or no, black or white, in or out, off or on, unless you try to explain how binary works in a computer program. All those ones and zeros. Just imagine texting 011011111, 011011101, 011001111. Now, for those of you that aren't fluent in binary, that's OMG. Science brought us a solution to off or on. The application of a resistor into an electrical flow gives you 3 options: on, half power, or off. The introduction of dimmer switches started in step form by adding or subtracting resistors until someone suggested that we apply the variable resistance of the potentiometer. It had been around and in use from the beginning of sending electricity into our homes, but never applied to a light switch in a private house. Why did it take decades to put these together? Because we had stored the components in different boxes, commercial use and home use. It took someone aware of the contents of both boxes with a desire to improve things to put them together. And then someone came along and threw the resulting product into a new box to sit on the shelf for a few more decades. Great ways to stall progress seems to be one of the other fields in which we excel. Imagine all the progress we could make if we cooperated and shared details of breakthroughs instead of hoarding all kinds of innovations in the name of profits and power. We would be using so much more solar power, wind power, and geothermal power, using less of the fossil fuels and doing less damage to the planet in the process. What does this have to do with dealing with diversity in the human race? Everything. Cooperation is the key to integrating all people into the mainstream, and utilizing the talents of the most underrepresented people can give new perspectives and solutions to problems that others may have just been ignoring because they had no direct effect on their own lives, or so they thought. We need to look beyond our own self-interest to work for the greater good for everyone. That's why I decided to make today's message about diversity rather than just focus on transgender issues. Yesterday was the Transgender Day of Remembrance, an important day to observe because of the violence against trans people, especially trans women. But we are not the only group facing violence on a daily basis. We are cheered when the women who had participated in the January 6th assault on the Capitol was sentenced to jail because she had bragged that being white, blonde, and rich, she would never go to jail. It seemed like we were making real progress. However, we were handed the verdict in the case of the young man who crossed state lines to take an automatic assault rifle to a riot, obviously with no intent of causing any trouble, killed 2 people and injured another, and was found not guilty on all counts. Progress halted and reversed instantly. We are so much better at destruction than building, at least it seems that way. In reality, we are capable of making progress and sealing rifts between fractions of society. We're just a lot slower at it than in causing those rifts in the first place. How can we reverse that trend? By being a little more careful about the things that we say in public spaces. Remember, most Facebook users have no idea that sarcasm exists and assume that you're serious. What you consider to be a clever way to emphasize your point of view can be perceived as the exact opposite by the completely literal-minded. It happens, and its effects can be devastating. There's an old saying in entertainment, especially comedy, to know your audience. And that's the problem with social media. You have no idea who a large part of your audience is. I bring some satirical material to my messages. I don't know if you've noticed or not. But I include some sarcasm and irony. I can do that because I know this audience. We tend to be more open-minded and capable of distinguishing between sarcasm and stating facts. I trust all of you to be able to tell when I'm joking. So we ask, what can we possibly do? We'll avoid making the problem worse, but what can we do to make it better? Well, to make it better, you need to be willing to go beyond just, suggesting your ideas here. You need to go out into the world. You all think for yourselves, and you all know how to speak. I've heard it. We all know how to speak. And as a group, Unitarian Universalists are one of the biggest squeaky wheels around. We get noticed. We show up at protests for just about everything. We need to keep doing that. We need to make more noise. And that's all you need to do to eventually make things change. I'm going to leave you. Our benediction today is actually a quote. No humor in here, of course. From the play Harvey by Mary Chase. In Harvey, we were introduced not only to an invisible 6'3" 3.5 inch tall white rabbit, but to the philosophies of Harvey's friend, Elwood P. Dowd, who said, "Years ago, my mother used to say to me," she'd say, "In this world, Elwood, you must be," she always called me Elwood. "In this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant." Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. You may quote me. So I have decided that same thing, and I would suggest that now when we go out into the world, we should be oh so pleasant while raising our voices. Go in peace. Shalom, namaste, sayonara. We'll go through all of the goodbyes. Okay, adios.